Musical chairs. Finding your seat. Baby, you should sit too. Oh, okay, no problem. This is my soft voice. Okay, cool. So I'm Jari Blanco, and I am the founder of theGIRLMOB. So thank you guys for coming out tonight. Really appreciate it. Appreciate your lovely faces. This is our third annual celebration of men of color. We take every July for the last 3 years and focus on our men of color, our black and brown guys, and try to do content on the website about it, do things on the social media, and also try to put together an event where we celebrate y'all. And the reason I did that from the beginning of the brand was because I felt like there was a lot of guys that were very supportive of the work that I've always done, and that have been mentors and just have really cheered me on. And I think a lot of men of color get a bad rep, right? And I think we all got our shit, right, that we need to work on. But I think it's important to bring our brothers, our lovers, our friends, our colleagues along in this journey, because I don't think we could do it by ourselves. So I want to thank Tatiana, who's going to come up here from Vayner and share a little bit about VaynerX and why they said yes to the Girl Mob for today's event.
What's up, y'all? I'm Tatiana. I work at VaynerMedia. I've been here for 2.5 years. For those who aren't familiar, VaynerX is a full stack agency. So we do all kinds of work for a lot of our clients. One of the key pillars at our company is culture and understanding culture and pushing that forward. When I started 2.5 years ago, I saw some really beautiful communities inside our walls. And so, I really saw an opportunity and wanted to work with folks to start creating platforms for telling the stories that aren't being told, or telling the stories that need to be seen and need to be heard. So this is the 4th event that I've collaboratively with the Amigo Squad, represented here today, have worked with. And shout out to Danny, who leads resources and development. I think this year has been really exciting to see community resource groups within our walls continue to emerge, with Vaynoir Invasions really coming out, and the Pride group celebrating and creating even more platforms and even more opportunities for us to tell the stories that are important, that don't get enough of the spotlight. So I'm really excited to partner with the Girl Mob. Yadi and I have known each other for a little bit, so I'm just really excited for us to be able to carve out this space and have these important conversations. So.
Okay. Thank you, Tati. All right, so I'm going to take a seat, and I'm going to ask the fellers who are coming up here to speak to join me. Where my fellas at? I'm not talking about myself. Clap it up, clap it up. Keep the energy going. Grab a mic, turn it on. Awesome. Okay, so I'm not a comedian, but Ian is. So up here we have Rick, Omar, Ian, and Daniel. And to kick it off, I want to make this as conversational as possible, and I don't want it to feel stuffy. But we have to do the traditional thing, which is like share with us your name, your pronouns, and a little bit about what you do, like your background, what you work on.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rick. I work here at VaynerX and client services. I work on a few brands with a couple people here. My creative partner, Daniel, is also on the panel. Shout out to you. Born and raised in Jersey, Afro-Latino descent, Honduras and Panama, woo woo. And yeah, pronouns he, him, her, sir, all of that.
My name is Omar Davis. I am a small business owner. I have a nice little thing I've been able to put together where I help to educate on the human anatomy, emotional intelligence, social emotional learning. I teach it to the kids. They're our future. Pronoun, figuring it out. Still learning about myself. So, we'll see.
Cool. Nice job.
Yeah, thank you, brother.
My name is Ian. I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm from Queens. This season I'm on a show on NBC. It's called Bring the Funny. I'm on a show on Comedy Central, stand-up show. I'm Afro-Latino also. My parents are Dominican, but I was born here, and my pronouns are he, him, and all that stuff. Thank you.
My name is Daniel Gonzalez. I'm an associate creative director here at VaynerMedia. I work with Rick on a bunch of brands as well. I was born in Mexico, and I grew up on the border between Texas and Mexico. My pronouns are he and him.
All right, thank you, y'all. And my pronouns are she and her. Trying to get in the habit. I think it's really important for us to. That's a way to hold space for people when it comes to that side of their identity, and it costs us a lot less to share than for someone who uses they, them, or Zer and has been left out of the conversation and felt uncomfortable. So I encourage you guys to do that as well. Okay, cool. So let's start from the beginning. I think it's really important for this conversation, especially as we use when they see us as the grounding point for this conversation, to talk about how y'all grew up. And so I would love to hear your earliest memory as a kid.
Well, my earliest memory as a child was watching Tales from the Crypt, which now makes sense why it's one of my earliest memories. I'm also a fan of the horror genre, but Tales from the Crypt to me, it was just like, yo, who's this ugly dude? Probably substituting dude with another word. But yeah, that's probably my earliest memory, watching Tales from the Crypt.
How old were you?
It's about 4 or 5.
And do you remember feeling scared or intrigued or curious?
I was curious. I think that's when I liked horror. And then Jada Pinkett came out with Demon Knight. Young Jada, about maybe 17, 18.
Okay.
So I was just like, there's a lot of interesting things going on right here.
And which one did you do this behind your parents' back, or they were like, this is a good idea for
Definitely behind my parents' back.
Okay, cool. What about you, Omar?
I mean, my earliest childhood memory, that's a really large bowl to pick from. I would have to say it was just, I grew up in the projects in Texas, so it was just a lot of violence, to be honest. And I didn't really understand it, but it became normalized, and that was very unfortunate. And thankfully, I had a family and a mother to support me to move out of that environment, to show me that I can have better. But that would definitely be one of the first things that I recognized that was happening around me, that it was a lot of turmoil, a lot of ambulances, too many ambulances.
My earliest childhood memories probably from just me and my cousins all being first generation Americans and dealing with our immigrant parents, how they were hard workers, but it was a lot of partying. So it was so it's you just remember the weekdays was a lot of work. You just see parents go off to work, but then the weekend is just nonstop partying. That's how I remember it. It's just all of us partying. The 90s was a crazy time, but as a kid, seeing that, it kind of shapes what you think it is, especially from both men and women, what you think it is to be a guy. You see the guys, they work hard and then they kind of provide, but then they party, but then they'll also hang out of the house. It's a weird thing. It's a weird dynamic to see growing up, but that's my earliest memories of my family kind of shaping the way of what I think a man is, but then me kind of having to figure it out on my own. But as a child, seeing that, probably my biggest memory.
Did you dance though?
Yeah, that's actually what I'm talking about. I remember as a 3-year-old, my aunt telling me, a 3-year-old, she's like, listen, if you don't, you gotta dance like a woman. You never gonna get a woman. You gotta dance. You can't just be what would translate to in Spanish like a herb in English. Like you can't just be the dude in the corner. Like if you want to, you tell a 3-year-old that it's gonna change the way you think. So that's my biggest memory going back to that. I always remember that's like a weird thing that like kind of sticks to you when like a grown up tells you gotta dance so women won't think you're cool, you know.
Awesome. What about you, Danny?
I think my earliest memory was my brother being born and coming home. And I was asking my mom details about it because obviously there's not a lot of pictures, but I remember like specific details that when he came home and her telling me that I needed to take care of him from now on because it's only just us two. But I remember like flowers over there, or that my mom put him like in a hamper for some reason with a pillow. And I asked my mom recently because I was thinking like, I remember being 5, I remember being 4, but I was trying to go like earlier than that. And so I was asking my mom and she was like, oh yeah, all those things were happening that there weren't pictures of. So that's my earliest memory, is my brother coming home from the hospital and my mom telling me that I need to take care of him.
And did you take care of him?
Yeah.
Okay.
I still do.
Do y'all have a good relationship?
Yeah, certainly. We like talk every day. He lives 15 minutes away, but we talk every day and
That's great.
try to keep it.
Is he a creative like you as well?
Yeah, but he's more creative like in the kitchen and like doing like graffiti. Like it's a little bit like a different path, but I think he's more creative than me, but he's just not in this industry.
Okay. Ian, you mentioned something about basically gender roles is what you were talking about, right? Like
Right.
you're on being like, if you don't dance, you're never gonna get a girl. And that's like, she was teaching you gender roles in her own
Right.
way. And so I would love to know, for all of you, like the first time that you understood gender as a concept, or that you were a man of color, like that you were a little boy of color or person of color.
I can jump in there. To answer your second question, realizing I was a person of color more so was kind of dealing with being Afro-Latino. And one thing you realize in this space, and I don't know if you can like identify, is that you're never Spanish enough to be Spanish, and then you're never black enough when somebody meets your parents to be black. And then, growing up, people don't really know the difference between race and ethnicity, which there is a clear, definitive difference, with race being a phenotypic trait that you can see or feel. But when you're growing up, everything's just together. It's like, you can't be this. And also going back to Spanish cultures not claiming their ethnicities and races that they're formed from. So that was a lot growing up, to the point where it took me to get to college and get one of my degrees in African American Studies to learn a lot about the diaspora and to kind of be like, oh, this is the shit I should have known when I was like younger. And it took me to pay out of pocket to learn that.
Yeah.
Same, but interestingly enough, I didn't actually grow up with my Latin side of the family, and I didn't even really connect with him until like recently. I'm in my 30s now, and when I first connected to that side of the family, I was in my 20s, but it was never really a thing. But to go back to what you said with that gender role and also the racial, just being pushed into an identity, I was the lightest one in my family. My mom's side was all African American, and we stemmed from Jamaica, so it was a lot of like, you too light skinned, it was always challenging that, am I black enough? And then finally when I learned about my Latin roots, now it's like, oh, I need to be really Latin. I need to like figure out how this works. But it was really when I was like less than 5 years old. My uncles would constantly tell me, in order to be a man, you gotta take a punch, and would hit a 4-year-old in the chest like I was a grown man. And when I cried, they were like, oh, you can't be soft like that. You can't be crying in the streets, And so that was very direct. It was like, oh, word. So in order to be a man, I can't show emotion. Apparently I can't cry because they're gonna hit me harder. And dang. And so that was the first time I was like, wow. And my mom used to try to say, baby, don't listen to them. You could be whoever you want. But in the streets, I literally could not, because I would have to fight everybody just to prove my worth. And it was a challenge, definitely.
Did all of you have a moment or someone in your family that like had a similar situation where they were telling you like, I'm gonna, like, they would punch you or something like that. I would love to know if, like, anybody had a similar situation where it was very much like, to be a man, you need to X, Y, and Z.
Oh, for sure, 100%. I mean, that's exactly what I was gonna say. For me, like, as back as I can remember, 3 years old, it was always like, men don't do this, men don't cry, men don't do this, men, are here and women are here. Even like from a Hispanic family, a lot of times, even the women, like how the women raise the kids, is not just the men. Like my dad was in my life, I had a lot of men in my life, but a lot of it came from the women. Like I've had conversations with my mom where she said things and I'm like, you have 3 daughters. Like how could you say that you have 2 sons, you have 3 daughters? Like you wouldn't feel cool if your daughter was on the end. But it's just, it goes back to how they being raised. So going back to me being 2, 3 years old, it was always like, men dance. If you don't cry, what are you crying for? What is pain? You just take it. It's just how you deal with it. Which in a way, it helps you in certain things. But then when you become an adult and you're dealing with like relationships and dealing with other people, you're kind of like, you try to explain to the person like, oh, I'm fucked up. That's why
I like to call that being emotionally constipated.
Yeah,
It's true.
Yeah.
right. It's how it is. I remember like as a kid, I having a conversation with my mom. We were talking about, I forgot what we were talking about, but it wasn't a conversation for a kid. But I remember her saying something along the lines of like men will always no matter what, men are always gonna like cheat and do whatever they want. But like you have to be, as a man, you just have to be respectful of your wife. Like, don't let her find out, kind of thing. When you tell somebody that as a kid, like that's insane. Like that just sticks with you, and you just think that's okay. Like so, a lot of times, and I'm not trying to make excuse for like men who are like not faithful or just not, but like you have to understand that when if you're raised that way, that's just what you think is correct. If every man in your life is telling you, yeah, you have your wife, but you could do this too. That's just what men do. That's what it is to be a man. Yeah. From a kid, when you grow up, you got some healing to do to become whole. Was that too deep? I'm sorry.
No. I think
It's good.
This went all the way in. It's good. I remember when I was like in 4 years old or something, I went on this, church is where I learned these gender roles. Went on this like trip and I was super excited to go with my mom. And then once we get to this location, which is like a campsite, they like split all the boys and all the girls into separate campsites. And like all the kids were older than me, and I remember I was like, that's not cool because I want to be with my mom. And then even the activities themselves were like, we had to do all this like fake hunting shit. And all of the girls had to do like arts and crafts projects. And I was like, that's what I want to do. And I also remember that back to like the horseplay or like this like turning a blind eye to like violence is like, even though these people were like church people, when like all the kids were like fighting, they would just let it like sort out, right? So let them figure it out, because even though we're like in a religious structure, like that, those still played out, right? Because I mean, there's like a ton of that shit in the church, in the Bible as well, like brothers fighting brothers, and this is like they just rely on scripture to let these things play out. And I just remember like it was so uncomfortable for me because these kids were like 8 or 9 and I was like 4 or 5, and that's when I remember like this is different.
I felt like the Hunger Games though.
For sure. Half of the kids didn't make it back. but I'm here.
No, I think it's really important because I think all of us get taught gender roles at a very, very young age, and I think our generation is really trying to unpack that, and I think we're just learning the proper language to even be able to express ourselves. And like 2 years ago, I didn't even know what gender roles were. I'm like, oh shit, I just thought this is the norm. This is just the norm. And so I think the more that we learn and the more that we vocalize these things, the more that the opposite of what we've been taught stops being normalized. And there's like this new way of really seeing each other and talking about like, whether it's in relationships or, whether it's romantic relationships or the relationship you have with your parents. I think all those things. I too have had to object to my mother at times where she's like, one time my fiance is here in the audience, Darrell, and I was like out with two of my girlfriends, and she was like, but where is he? how could you leave your man? Like, how? And I'm like, what do you think he's gonna do? Like, fly away? Like, let the man be, I don't know, he's busy. So I think like it's all that generational stuff that's really hard to break, and also for us to understand that like we can't necessarily change the people that they are, but that we have an opportunity to change the type of people that we want to be, especially when children are involved. So I want to talk about this idea of the rite of passage that has to do with coming across a confrontation with a cop. I've had 3 to 4 conversations this year alone with Black and brown men that have shared this experience where they're like, yeah, I knew it was a rite of passage. And in fact, one of them was at an event that I went to called The Moth. How many of you know The Moth? It's like a poetry event, okay? So one of the guys was talking about his rite of passage, this rite of passage of having a confrontation with either a cop or a racist person, and how his whole life he basically had been like low-key holding his breath, waiting for this thing to come. And when it finally happened, like white, stereotypical man that you would think of in a pickup truck rode past him and called him the N-word. And he said he was so shocked. He was on the bus stop, and he says he was so shocked that the guy drove off, and after like 15 seconds, he wanted to run down the street and tell him to come back because he wanted to be able to react to it, and instead he kind of just froze. And so would love to know, first from the audience, how many of y'all do you feel that you've had that experience where you're like, it's a rite of passage that you feel like it's gonna happen or it hasn't happened, right? And so I would love to know from your perspective, has your perception of policing government changed as you've gotten older? And, you know, again, talking about when they see us, I think the series can be deeply triggering for our community as someone we know, if not ourselves, have had their livelihood threatened by the police and or have not survived that interaction, right? We see it on social media, we see it on the news, and a lot of times the story is told in a different way that we know to be true. And so again, I want to know if like your perception with law enforcement has changed at all since you were a child, and your thoughts are when you see how men who look like you are being treated by quote unquote authority figures who should instead be protecting like our communities.
Well, for me, my perception of the law has always been the same, and it hasn't changed, mostly because the law and the identity of power hasn't changed. And I mean, I've been pulled over as a passenger. I've been thrown in jail.
But what's your idea? That you said that it hasn't changed. What is it?
Well, it really has to do with underlining racism. But at the same time, I've been harassed by cops of color. Like, so it's a power dynamic. And so, I mean, it's been very, very rare where a man of color who was a cop approached me and was wilding out. But being from Texas, you know, again, I've been stopped just for being at a stoplight in a car. And don't get me wrong, there are times I did some real foul shit. And I did have a very aggressive teenage life, and I did kind of deserve to go to jail at those times. But what it came down to is that it was always immediately when something had happened, it was always a stimulus of fear rather than safety. And so even if I was just walking down the street with some people, if a cop was passing by, suddenly I'm like, oh, where they going? What they doing? Oh, they turn a corner? All right, cool, we cool. And so it was always this extra like fear based around the perception of police and power and authorities. And unfortunately, it just has a lot to do with racism, period. You know, I know a lot of folks from Texas who were hella racist as kids, and those dudes are cops now. And they used to straight up call me, oh, you my what they say, you my yellow nigga friend. I'm like, word, who, what, huh? Yellow? Homie, I'm a man of color, but that was what they called me because I was light skinned, but they still noticed these African features. And so it was very, very unfortunate, but I don't think that much has changed, to be honest. Like, it's probably even gotten worse.
I actually want to jump on that. You brought up a good point of being around cops, and how it makes you feel, even if you're not doing anything. And I had an internal thought process about that, and I actually thought, like, will I ever have a moment in my life where I will not feel like that? And I don't think I will.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is very scary as a man of color and just a person of color. To answer your question, I had a very familiar situation with like a cop passing. I was walking to, if you are from Jersey or been to Jersey, we're known for many things, one of them being chicken shacks. So I was walking to Crown Fried and, minding my goddamn business, living my best life. And when I was going across the street, a car, the police car, drove by, and he literally screamed out the car, "Get out the street, nigger," and drove off. I was 11. I was like president of like my youth organization and like all this shit, and I was just like, I didn't do anything. And I was just very confused, and I felt really hurt. And then also answer your question about how I felt then versus how I feel now about authorities, specifically cops. At that time, I thought it was very personal. I thought they were just like being a dick, and there are bad people out here, and they should not be, known to represent the group. Now, as an adult, I know that was wrong, and that this is very much set up systematically and systemically for us. And to your point, that they don't need to be a white person to be set up that way. So it was more so taking it from an individual aspect and kind of looking at the group as a whole, and it being a power struggle, them feeling like they have more agency than another group.
When that situation, not to talk, I don't want you to talk about your trauma if you don't want to, but I'm just interested as an 11-year-old, right? Like, what do you do when you go home? Did you talk to your parents about that?
Definitely talk to my mom about it. My mom is a beautiful immigrant-ass mom, and she was just like, well, what was you doing in the street? What were you like, very much looking at me as to why were you in that place at that time? And I was like, I was going to get some chicken. Like, I didn't do anything. She was like, what did you do wrong? Like, why did they say that to you? And then, they're like, oh, these racist-ass fucking cops. Like, then go about your day, because, she's lived a life. And for me, it was just like, but we were taught that cops are to protect us. And, I thought our tax money pays their bills and stuff like that, like trying to make logic out of it. And that's where they got me fucked up, like trying to be logical about the cops. So it made me feel crazy. But I, unfortunately, was granted the opportunity. I was president of a youth organization, and we had this large event / block party / like small youth council where we actually had a conversation about stuff like that. And I kind of turned that action into like a positive, knowing that majority of the mass don't have that to go to, don't have an adult that has the free time to care about youth to do that. And that's just based off of living and like being able to like provide for their family and just have that extra time. So fortunately enough, I had that, and I was able to kind of vent through that fashion. But I also know other people that have been affected in different ways and went a different path.
I've always tried to like have a good relationship with like police. Not that I hang out with them, but if I'm ever approached by them, like I'm a really polite person. Like I address everybody like sir and ma'am, everybody. Like, so when I get approached by police, I always try to treat them with like respect, because I mean it is a job. I understand that there's the racial tension that you said, there's racism, but it is a job that does deserve respect, and as a job, not every police officer is a bad police officer. There are bad police officers, but me thinking that all of them are bad does not help the situation. So if you treat them with respect, I think generally speaking, you can have a better turnout. However, I have been pulled over in New York many of times, but when I started touring for comedy, like I've been pulled over in Biloxi, Mississippi at nighttime. That's a whole different dynamic than getting pulled over in the Bronx. Like that was the only time I felt like there's a chance I could get shot here. There's like a fair shot here. Like it's up in the air. I've never felt that like in New York. Like when I get pulled over in New York, I was like, whatever. I get a ticket, maybe tints on the window. But like there was like it was like a real worry. Like like a panic. I think that was like the changing moment where I was like, where at least for me, I was like, oh, this is like a real problem. Like, you shouldn't feel like this when you get pulled over. You shouldn't feel like. And I remember I was with my friend. He's also from New York. When we were on the road, we got pulled over, and he almost had like a nervous breakdown. Like he was. You would have thought that they came out like with guns, and they didn't. But I understood why he felt that way. I felt the same way too. Which you shouldn't feel that from your law enforcement. That's not like a good feeling. So there's definitely something that needs to be fixed. I don't know what the answers are.
So I don't know how to start this, but I think that we live in a police state. So I'm like ACAB through and through. Like, I know it's a job, but like, you know, I have family members in law enforcement, but I don't think they need to be in law enforcement. And I think going full circle as a child, like my earliest members of law enforcement were like my aunts and uncles telling me when I was misbehaving that they're gonna tell the cop to take me away, right? So they're like, we're gonna tell the cop to come grab you. And like, that was like, in a way I understand that it was like a way for me to behave, but it's also like instilling like respectability politics. Like, if I behave a certain way, they're not gonna come for me, right? And then that played out a lot as a child. Like it wasn't just one instance of interaction with law enforcement. It was consistent, because every time we crossed the border to visit my grandma in Mexico, every time we would cross back, it was like harassment. And like, just like the freedom that they have. And that's one of the things that struck me from the show, is like when the guy says like, when the cop wants to do something, he's gonna get it, right? So like, separating my mom from us to question children, like, what were you doing there? And how long were you there? And just like the fact that that's illegal to ask an 8-year-old, a 7-year-old, those types of questions, like, so like, that's everyone's life who lives on the border. It's not like a chance occurrence. It's like when you're in line to cross the border and you see the car ahead of you and see that those people were not harassed, and you see what they look like, and then you see that your car is next, and it's almost like whether the cop's gonna stop or not is it's a roll of the dice. Like, you have a 1 in 6 chances that they're gonna be an asshole to you, and like ask you things that they're not supposed to. So like, since then, it's almost like come full circle that like the mistrust and knowing that, you know, that cops shouldn't have SWAT gear, and they shouldn't be busting into people's houses. And so like, I've come full circle for that, to like being anti that, because as I read more and more, and I, you know, reject that people who behave well will not be harassed, is like, that's just not the reality that we live in. Like, I was reading something like 100 people get their houses broken into by the police every day. And because cops have that type of gear, tactical gear that they shouldn't have, and that's just like, it gives me like a really bad reaction.
Yeah. And they have like the authority, right? Like,
Right.
I think talking about perceived innocence, I think for any black
Like
or brown
civil
person,
forfeiture.
yeah,
like,
it's
that's
like
the thing.
you're president of. You could have been like, look, officer, like, I get straight A's, and you could have had all the things. And I think it makes us. It goes back to the idea of like, we have to be 3 times as good, and still, you know what I mean?
Like, there was one time I got pulled over in college with my homie, and I joined the military at 17, so I had my military ID, I had my Rutgers ID, and he still gave me issues. And I'm like, bro, like, what? How else do I need to look as a black man to not look crazy to you? And still, they stopped us, pulled us over, questioned me and the homie. Didn't think we knew each other. Luckily, it was a good friend. I knew his birthday, I knew his address, but they asked me all these questions. Do you know him? Where's he from? Blah, 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 blah. They just thought we were just 2 guys doing some type of drug deal or something.
That's crazy.
Both have Rutgers IDs. Both from Jersey.
Like, I have a scholarship, man. No, I feel like that's really difficult. I mean, I would say for me, on the flip side, is anytime me and Darrell leave like New York City, I get that feeling in the back of my like neck where I'm like, I could be like busy like joking with him or listening to music, but I'm always looking at the side mirror and I'm just like, who's behind us? And I'm like, to have to live with that kind of paranoia, because you're just like, at any moment something like this can happen, because it is the norm of this country. That really fucking sucks. You know, it's like, we pay our taxes just like anybody else. We're good citizens, whatever you want to call it. But it's like, I don't think, I agree. I hate that that's like the reality that we live under. And it's emotionally exhausting. And so I would love to know who do you like call upon when you need to feel seen and feel safe, and when you're having one of those moments where you're like, you know, like your friend in the car with you, like imagine if it would have been him by himself and you were not in that car and he just had that emotional breakdown and the cops would have thought that's, you know, it could have turned out a completely different way. So wondering if you guys have like your go-to people when you need to emotionally like detoxify from the shit that's happening in the world.
This silence does not represent us not having those people. Give us a second.
I really talked to my best friend who I've known since like middle school, and like I think it was like a microcosm of this conversation. Like he texted me yesterday for the same reason. He's like, I feel like shit, like I'm feeling some type of way about my life, and I was like, you know, let's jump on a call and let's make it a thing that where we just talk to each other every day, or like every Monday, like put a Google Cal invite, whatever. And it was so funny though, because I wanted to reach out to him too, because about these questions and how we were feeling about the situation. He does a lot of like political consulting, so where I feel some type of way about what's going on in politics, I give him a call. But it was funny that he texted me, and then yesterday we just talked for like an hour, and we hadn't talked in like, I don't know, a couple of months because he has kids or whatever. But it was really nice that like I remember that he can come to me and I can go to him, and I've known him since like 6th grade, so it's chill.
With me, it would probably be my dad. Like, me and my dad have a pretty good relationship. But it's weird because my dad is like he's an intellectual, he's an educator, but then he's also like very religious. So when you try to have a conversation about something that happened, he kind of throws religion into it, which is I'm not against it. Like I believe in God also, but like. Sometimes it's like, this isn't about religion. This is about, I got pulled over by the cops. Like, it's not in the Bible. They didn't talk about this. You can search, but you're not going to find that scripture, you know? So that could be frustrating, but he would probably be the guy that I go to. Yeah.
I mean, I actually never had any males that I can call brothers or father figures or people who I looked up to. I had to make that journey on my own and then heal from that, and then also allow men to come in my life so I can reshape that identity so that I can have brothers. And this year alone, I definitely do have brothers I talk to, but I would definitely say the person that knows me the best and that I speak to about everything is definitely my lovely lady. She's just there, you know, and she doesn't criticize, and, you know, she understands. And it's not even her upbringing, but to see what I have to go through. There's a time we got pulled over. Actually, I wasn't double parked. I was parked outside of a Starbucks while she was inside getting coffee for us with our child in the car. Cops came out, obviously didn't pull the white lady over that was in the same spot, but they came to me, towed our car. Here we are sitting on the side of the road with a baby. But the craziest part is that they were assholes until she walked up. You know, this pretty white woman walks up and they're like, "Oh, you with him?" And she's like, "Yeah, what's the problem?" "Oh, and I'm like, "Yeah, so what's up?" And what they still already, you know, had issues, and so they towed the car, and we were sitting on the side of the road, and I'm like, Jersey, can't escape it. From Texas to Jersey, can't escape it. But I guess it was just more recently where I decided to have men in my life that I can actually talk about those things and just really, like, you know, let loose.
I would say I'm fortunate enough to have a lot of people that I'm close with. But when it came to specifically like men in my life and like people that like I can identify with and like help me through, I wasn't really open. My best friend here can attest to that. I don't really like complaining. If I was going through something and I know it probably affected the masses of the group of people that also deal with it, I probably won't even share it, because it's more so like we're just dumping on each other and there's no solutions, and that dumping gets heavy. So I'd rather not be a dumper, and I was the guy taking. And it got to a point as I got older, and my best friend can attest, and he was like, "Yo, you need to like share." And I was like, "No, I don't. I'll be fine." Like, what? But it was as I got older that I was able to be like, "All right, this is fucked up." And you're like, "All right, talk." And I would be able to like share more. But being younger, it was more so like, this is the life we live. This is the life we've been given. And I'm very much solution oriented. So it's like, rather than dump and share, it's kind of like, all right, so what's next? which is great in a lot of different other situations, not necessarily in the emotional realm.
I think most men are like, how do I fix this? And it's like, sometimes you just got to sit in it. And it's like, I don't want to sit in it. And it's like, I don't know what to tell you. Omar, I think from the point of view of your work, would love to talk about like vulnerability and what we're talking about in terms of like the emotional realm, and how I know you work with children. And so like, how do you teach them these things and how it affects their brain and their bodies?
Well, it's all about accountability. So first things first is, we got to know about what we are as a human and as a species. We are dynamic. We are a multiverse. We are a universe. We are many things. And when you know how your body works and how the systems work, like that sympathetic nervous system where you start feeling that panic and the heartbeat and the cortisol and the adrenaline, like it's a system. And it's only because you feel that you're literally about to get eaten by a lion. Except the lion is like a dirty email or some stupid shit, or like a cop. And so what happens is we just panic. Our brain literally shuts off our rational thinking, and we're only responding from emotion. And from there, if you don't take breaths and calm yourself down, then you will continuously respond from frustration. And then you will justify it because your ego is now in play, and here we are. And so it's all about accountability from how you feel and how you're reacting to things. And so with these kids, especially whenever they're out in the streets, I have to break up a fight between some of my students, and I'm like, yo, let's just think about this. If you would have gotten to a fight, who's the first people that are gonna show up out of nowhere? The cops, exactly. And then what? Oh, we probably get in trouble. More than that. So much can happen from that. But if you're not accountable for your actions and being responsible for yourself, and then understanding how this system works, then you're gonna sink like the rest of us. But what it really comes down to is being vulnerable means that you understand the way you're feeling and being able to express that. And that takes courage. You can't be vulnerable without being courageous. And that was the one thing that I had to learn, especially with what I was told. And once I found out, I was like, oh, wow. So I need courage to be vulnerable, and I need vulnerability to be courageous? Like, what? It threw me for a loop. But once I finally understood it, it allowed me to also be vulnerable, like in my relationship especially. I came to a point where I was just like, I just want to be transparent and vulnerable, and I don't know what that looks like. And it was scary for both of us, because we were like, what does that look like? Oh, shit. And I was crazy. She can attest to it. She's like, yeah, that was a time you like really going through it. But I had to learn that, and I had to understand what it meant and what it was. But for the kids, when we're teaching them these things, especially in those streets, if you confronting a cop first, feel what you feel. Like, are you scared right now? Do you feel scared? And if so, take some deep breaths. And then secondly, you need to know your rights. Like, once I knew my rights, after going to jail for the 4th time, I was like, I need to know what my rights are. I really need to know how these cops are talking to me, man. And once I learned my rights, that's how the conversation started. As soon as the cop would approach and be like, yes, sir, officer. So what is it that you pulled me over for? Or what is it that you're stopping me for? I need to know right now, because if not, you can't search or ask me any questions, and I hope that you have a good day. And then that's when they really get, oh, you think you're smart? No, I'm really smart, actually. And that has nothing to do with this situation, but it does have to do with the fact that you're making me feel uncomfortable. Now, I'm curious to know why. What did I do to be in this situation? And if they can't answer that with no legal, like you got pounds on you, or you, like one time a cop was like, well, you ran on the sidewalk with your bike. Homie, I was getting off my bike and walked onto the sidewalk. And he hopped the curb and everything. I was like, you on the curb right now with a car. It's crazy. But whenever it comes down to being vulnerable and understanding these things, it's really about just allowing yourself to feel. What are you feeling? And question that. And then let that be authentic, and don't let nobody tell you that you ain't feeling that. Express that authentically, like, share, leak it out, because it is powerful. And because I didn't have anyone to speak about that with, like especially as men growing up, it was really damaging for me. I didn't trust not one dude. Like, oh, dude walks by, I don't trust him, what are you doing? Another guy walked by, I don't trust him, what are you doing? And so I realized this is a problem. So I had to heal that within myself by understanding what it means to be vulnerable and accepting my brothers.
Thank you for sharing that. I think something that has kind of come up in the conversation is showing up, right? And I think there's how you show up for yourself, especially in a post-Obama age in the U.S., and then how do you show up for other men of color, and how do you show up for women of color, right? So I think part of the reason I mentioned that the Girl Mob focuses on men of color in July is because there's men of color who continuously support us and who show up for us. And so I want to talk a little bit about how y'all have shown up for women of color, whether it's at home or in your relationship or at work, and what that looks like, again, now in the age of Trump, right?
It's funny you say that. I was actually having a conversation with someone who's here, and on my way here, my words verbatim was, I would not be in this position where I am today if it wasn't for women of color. I literally walking here, I was literally telling you, and literally that's everything from just where I worked to like her seeing me and saying, I'm leaving this job to go somewhere else, and you are working too hard here for these people being synonymous with another type of phrasing. And she was like, I'm going to go somewhere else, and when I get this job, I'm going to pull you with me. And I've heard that before, so I was just like, thanks. And she became a director somewhere and said, Rick, I want you to work for me. And then I went to work with her, and she left, went somewhere else. She pulled me with her to the next place. And I'm here now just based off of her trust, like, listen, you're great. And I want to make sure people know how great you are. And that's just work. And then you got, your parents, and one of my other best friends is a black woman, and the balance of having a black man and a black woman as best friends, and just the different insights you get there. Just showing up in general as an adult. And people who know me already know this, but I can be anywhere. You can be a stranger. You could be a hobo on the street. You can be homeless. You can be a crazy person. If you are a person with any amount of melanin on you, I am here to stand up for you. I may not know you, and as long as you're not disrespecting me or any of my peers, I'm here to stand up for you for as long as I feel like I can. Off strength, because I would want somebody to do that for me.
I was going to ask, where do you think that stems from? Because I think a lot of us want to figure out how to do that. A lot of us are just so exhausted from like our own depletion. A lot of us are like, you know what, that's just not my job. Like, I'm just trying to figure out and crawl out of this. And so what do you think that stems from? Because that's a really powerful statement to be like, doesn't matter who you are, I'm showing up for you.
It literally stems from like going back to like wanting someone to do that for you or a loved one of yours. Like, if I'm not there, I want somebody to do that for somebody that I care for. Like, I don't know you, but please show up, because I'm not there. And I'll do the same thing. And most other types of people don't show up. And we all we got. So it's like, if you're not showing up and I'm not showing up, then we ain't showing up, and nobody showed up. And now it's quiet.
That's a poem right there. Do you think it's because also you've had people that have shown up for you and have kind of like conditioned you to also be this type of
Most
person?
Most definitely. Whether it be one of my degrees in African American Studies and just having those professors and those people. I remember watching the Emmett Till movie for the first time, freshman year, Black Experience in America, 300 level class, like mad students. And the professor prefaced it with, you're about to watch this movie. If you've seen it for the first time, please don't walk out of here and start fighting white people. And I was like, what is he talking about? And we watched it, and when the movie ended, I've never experienced this in my life. You had like 300 students, and the movie cuts off, and everyone's just like, had, like, some girls were crying, like it was just crazy. And he was like, all right, class dismissed. And
Damn,
you're supposed,
okay, go sit with that.
And go sit with that. It was kind of like, now you need to exist in a world where shit like this happens. So when you go through shit like that, and fortunately I was given the luxury, sadly, to go through something like that, it really helps put you in a mental state to take charge, even when you feel like you don't even have the credentials to. Why not? The worst that can happen is that you lose.
Thank you for sharing, Rick. What about y'all? How do you show up for women of color and other people of color in your life?
Women of color, I mean, I don't even know what, like, I'm not just saying this because some of y'all are here, but this, yeah, women of color. I mean, it's not even comparable. I mean, they're just like I was like, if you look back at, when we had the elections in Alabama, like what I mean, a pedophile didn't get into office because women of color showed up to vote. I mean, if I go back to college, like I remember when I was in college, like all the women of color, they were like just always, they were just on it. Like I don't understand how we could come from the same neighborhoods, the same and you could just be so much more well adjusted than the men. But I'm a fan. Is dope. But if you look back, even like if you go back to like the 80s, when a lot of male black male fathers weren't in the household because of the crack epidemic and different drug laws that took the men out of the household. Black women held it down then, and then they continued to hold it down throughout. But now you have black men that are returning to the household, getting educated, and now you have educated black women and educated black men raising these super black babies that I'm excited to see in 20 years where this will end up.
Love that. I'm here for those super black babies.
Super black babies.
Super.
Somebody should make a shirt about that. Larissa, just make sure you write that down. Okay, cool.
Super black baby.
Super black babies.
You can fly.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. What about you, Omar?
Well, it was, I have such a deep respect because every woman that I knew growing up was a woman of color, and they propelled in ways that the men did not. All the men were going to jail, in and out of drugs, violence and gangs. And I saw all these women literally pick up their kids and move out of the projects into these suburban neighborhoods where now we were assimilating with, Caucasians and other types of folks. And for me, I was like, what? Like just watching entrepreneur women, corporate women, like came from nothing but found a way. And that was dynamic. My mom's today is my biggest hero. She and one of my aunts, they did things today that I'm just like, I can't believe it. Like, I'm here because of y'all. Like, there would be no Omar if it wasn't for you doing what you needed to do. And I watched it. I watched them come out of that mess and go through the hard times and deal with all these babies that didn't have no fathers around, and just really stand up and be the backbone. And so for me, I was like, yo, you're goddesses, period.
And how do you show up for women of color now in the work that you do, and just like
Same
things
way
that you approach?
I let them know that they're goddesses. There's really two things that's real. For one, being a woman in the world, the whole world, is super fucking hard, period. Being a woman of color in the world is like 10 times harder. So whenever I really digested that and started to see the tribulations and the things that women had to go through that were from my background, I had to just then understand that we need to start treating this situation a little different. I need to start treating this situation a little different. I can't act crazy. I can't call you out your name. I can't, turn around and look at you when you're walking by. I can't do all these things that are gonna personify you as somebody other than a goddess. And I'm still learning how, because what it comes down to is I'm still breaking those patterns of the male ego and the misogyny that were taught to me. And so cutting that shit out it's like wrestling with your ego blindfolded with no hands, but yet it's really the most challenging thing you can ever do. I'm just trying to say that. But getting past it and understanding that my viewpoint was really twisted, I'm now seeing that me showing up for these young women or older women, it's just by seeing them, period. You don't have to know everyone's story. You just gotta see them and let them feel appreciated, because everyone wants to feel appreciated and valued. And so just showing up in that way where, it's always, how you doing, my sister? Good. And then let it be that. But the interaction of how much I pour out through my emotions and my transparency towards them is palpable. And so hence why, the work that I'm doing right now is really growing. And to be honest, right now, the people who are really helping me to even grow more are women of color. You know, if it's not my cousin who's sitting in the back seat talking about, no, you need to do this. You playing. You need to schedule them dates, homie. Like, you need to get it on the calendar. Why one event? Do 8. Like, work it out. You got it. And I'm like, word, I got it? She's like, you got it? I'm like, I got it. And she was one of the inspirations because she was like a big sister to me growing up. And so seeing her and having that back, you know, and kicking my ass whenever I needed to be kicked, you know, it's just, you know, it's beautiful, to be honest. It's wonderful. Thanks.
For me, I think the workplace is about visibility and advocacy, right? So always trying to champion, always requesting for people, for diversity, for women of color to be on my specific team, and being like a creative director, having to have influence over that is very important, because we see that through that lens when it comes to like hiring influencers or working with certain talent. Like, I always have that priority because I want, again, to give the opportunity to people that are like the people who gave an opportunity to me, and making sure that, like, understanding that in my position between the level I was and the level I am now and the level I'm going to be, it comes from advocating for my team and making them shine, whether it's the communications to people who are not seeing on the day-to-day. It's like, hey, they're doing this, they're on top of that, and just praising them for all the good work that they do, because I feel like when some of those managers are twice removed, they don't get to see that and they don't get to hear about it. So that's how I measure success, is if they get promoted, and like, no ego, if they get promoted above me or whatever, that's a success for all of us, because they're going to do the same. And outside of work, I would say it's you know, supporting programming, and for people who that they can do nothing for me, how I can connect them with people that line up with their vision. So like, knowing people that are like, hey, I know a person who's trying to do this, you should meet this person, right? So like, there's nothing in it for me. I'm not a broker of any sort, but like, if I could leverage those connections and offer them before they're asked, I feel like being proactive before somebody's like, hey, do you know somebody who prints shirts? Do you know anybody that does websites? Like, before people have to ask me, because I know that's a process, right? Like, getting over it and like feeling some type of way about approaching somebody to help you is being proactive. Like, I think you should meet this person because your visions and your creativity and your objectives align, or just saying that you should just meet, right? So like, connecting people, women of color, to people that would align to their objectives, yeah.
And I actually want to add to that with Daniel, because even for some of what we do for work, like, we are very clear in making sure we're putting people on of color, specifically women, to the point where, like, one of our last shoots, we had a woman of color be a DP for a video shoot we had, and we literally made an agreement. I was like, yo, any shoot we do, anything where we have the power to pick someone of color, specifically women, we will choose that. Like, we understand we're in a space where some people just won't choose that person, or for whatever politics, whatever have you. I'll leave that one alone. When we have the choice in who can work with us, we are very clear as to who can work with us and who should be working with us, whether they hear us or not. But at this point, at our levels, luckily, we're able to make those decisions.
I think that's super important, because I think there's the showing up emotionally for people and the like, I see you and all that. And then I think like showing up for people where it's like, where do you have power? Because we all have power in some way, shape, or form at some level. And so like, where do we have power, and how can we wield that power to set other people up for success? And I think for us as a community in general, we need to definitely keep working on getting out of the mentality that there's only like room for one of us. I feel like that this is a theme that has come up for me since I was a teenager. And so really knowing that like, your blessings will never be blocked because they're yours to have. And I totally, I love what y'all said about being able to put people on through the work that I do at my day job. Anytime, since I work heavily in programming, anytime I have an opportunity to include a woman of color or a person with a disability or any of that, I'm always trying to put somebody on, and I'm always trying to get them paid. And because to me, it's like, it's kind of what you said earlier, is like showing up for people, because I would love for somebody else to, if I'm not there, for somebody else to show up for somebody else. And I feel like that's contagious. Like, I see people at my job now that without me even asking, they're like, oh, wait, who's on that panel? No. 50% of those people need to be people of color. Jadi, do you know? Yep. And it's like, it's so cool to see that, where like, I don't even have to like prompt that anymore. They just naturally, they're questioning things. And you know, if it feels good to be on the right side of history. So they're like, yeah, like, how do we get these people paid, or how do we whatever? And so I think that kind of work is contagious, and I think it can be very exhausting, but someone that encourages that for sure. My last question before we do Q&A is, we talked about some like heavy topics today, and so I just want to end it on a really high note and talk about Black boy joy, and so or brown boy joy, and so like, what are things that you do that bring you joy?
Dance. I dance and I dance.
First of all, to my friends that made this sound in the audience of like, sheesh, screw you guys.
Go for it.
I hang with my friends, you know, go out, chill, stuff like that. Shout out to all of y'all laughing right now. It's honestly just being free with your friends, and free in the sense of the word, whether it just be sharing and exchanging information, emotions. This one quick story that kind of falls in line with that, my best friend. I remember we were growing up, and I don't know if I ever told you the story, but growing up and chilling, and he has an identical twin. Him and my brother chill, so it all just worked out. And I remember one time, but this started like years ago. I would be leaving from like chilling and having a good time, and he was like, "Yo, bro, I love you," and I was like, "Fuck out of here!" Like, all right, like whatever. He was, and like it took a while for me to just understand. I was just like, "That's okay." Like, that's fine. And I feel like that kind of fits right into the puzzle piece of Black Boy Joy, just being able to enjoy being human, enjoy feeling love and giving love. And, like, you're a fucking human. Like, it's not that deep. Like,
Did you ever say I love you back?
Oh, yeah. I do that now. I do that now. But it took a while. It took a while. He'd be like, I love you. Like, all right, bro.
Yeah.
I'll holla. I got you.
Like, yeah, that sounds good. Okay, so...
For me, it's dancing. There's times where I'll just go and put music on and dance with my eyes closed the whole time, and it captivates me, and it allows me to just really express freely. And, you know, I just so happen to be very good at it. So it looks good while I'm doing it. But one of the things that I've recently learned to stimulate my own joy, which is playing with my inner child. And I know that kind of sounds weird, but playing with my inner child means that I actually do a lot of meditation towards my inner child and figuring out what he wants to be happy, what he wants to stimulate himself, because I'm truly just a little boy pretending I'm an adult. And so by learning how to trust my inner child to do whatever he wants, whether it's drawing, dancing, jumping, being social, whatever, it can literally be sitting in the dark. I used to spend hours sitting in the dark, and my roommates come home and be like, yo, why you in the dark? I'm like, yo, I was just sitting here thinking about myself, you know, just thinking about life and everything, and, you know, everything we've been through. But for me, definitely, that's been the most gratifying thing for the past 5 years, is just spending time with my inner child and just letting him live freely.
For me, I really get a lot of joy from performing, like doing stand-up comedy. One of the biggest joys of my career so far, was I dealt, you know, as a black, you know, Hispanic, Dominican, I dealt a lot with, like, you know, you mentioned not being black enough for African Americans, not being Hispanic enough for Dominican, but over the last few years, it was like, you know, with the Afro-Latino movement, there's like a big movement. Like,
it's popping now.
Yeah, it's it's definitely mainstream right now. But you see, like, with people like Amara and even like Cardi, like, honestly, I feel like whatever your opinion of them might be, they're so important because they allow people to see it and be like, oh, I'm that, and I can be that, and that's a thing. So when I got my first opportunity to be on TV, when I did a show for Comedy Central, that's like the joke I decided. I did a joke about being like Afro-Latino, and it's a joke. Some people didn't get it, but most people got it, and I got so much like emails and DMs from like just black Hispanic people that were like, oh man, thank you for saying that, it's so dope to see it. And the reason I wrote that joke was because I kept going to different places in the country. Like in New York, most people get it, but some places in the country, when you tell them, they're like, you're Dominican, they're like, oh, but what do you mean you're black? And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm black, but I'm Dominican too. They're like, wait, what are you talking about? And I'm like, no, I can speak Spanish. They're like, when did you learn Spanish? It's like, that's my language. I was like, all right, never mind. I was like, I'm gonna just write a joke to encapsulate the whole thing. So when I did it and the reception I got, that was like the biggest joy I've got in my career so far. Just being able to see, because I definitely know that for me, people like Cardi and Amara, like being able to see them has helped me accept myself as what I am and as a person. So being able to help other people see that too, because when you see it on TV, for some reason, it just makes you feel better as a person. That's probably been my biggest joy.
On a personal level, what brings me joy, I'm a first-time uncle. My brother just had a baby. So, like, I get it now, and that's kind of fun. Like, I thought I would never get it. And on a macro level, just working in an industry that's so youth-obsessed, I've become, like, finding the joy in getting older, which is something that I thought I would never could embrace. Like, you know, I'm 35, and just, like, learning that there's so much to learn and a different perspective and just, like, embracing maturity, that brings me joy versus, like, seeing other people struggle with getting older as a negative. I am really enjoying just getting older.
I feel that. I saw a tweet somebody that I follow was like, she's like, I'm about to be 29 and I am not looking forward to cellulite and wrinkles and all this stuff. And I'm like, damn, 29 is like, what? I'm like, girl, I'm 33. But I was just like, wow, I'm so glad that I don't feel that way about aging. I'm so like, I'm genuinely happy that I'm getting older and that like I get to exist and like learn. And I'm just like, wow, I have so many cool things I get to like pass down, hopefully.
I
So
would
I think
ask,
having
like, what's
that.
her ethnicity? Because maybe she had to worry.
No, she didn't have to worry. That's the thing.
Okay. Well.
Anyways, it's crazy. Okay, do we have one or two questions from the audience before we get into our performance? Any preguntas? You have one? Yeah?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for creating this platform, the organization, and then also dedicating the month to Men of Color. So that's very awesome. You guys, thank you very much for being so vulnerable as well. That's really, it is courageous. So I appreciate that. You were speaking about, I forgot your name, I'm sorry.
Rick.
I'm
Ron.
Ron. You're talking about showing up, and one of the things I have a lot of conversation about is when is it not an obligation to educate those in those awkward conversations of like identity, right? So in high school, I've always been all white high school. I went to college, it was like, I wasn't all white, but most people were from Detroit, which is 85% black. Mm-hmm. And so when I was in college, that was the most black people I've been around my life. But I've always been reminded, you're cool for black guy. When I was high school.
Word.
And sometimes I get, you're not black enough when I was in college. But even now professionally, where there's conversations about race, and some people kind of get offended, it's easier to quick to get offended as opposed to educate. And I'm wondering, have you ever had a challenge when it's like, you know what, I don't feel like educating this person. Let somebody else teach this, because you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I got you on that.
I would like to hear your thoughts on.
Do you work here?
Good question. I will say I was the only black student in my high school graduating class, so I get that. I also was the president of my Black Student Union in college, so I get that. But, and this is for everybody of color in the room, it is not your job to educate anybody. Don't feel like you have to. Always make it a choice. For me, I feel like I always need to show up from a level of protection and a level of making sure someone else is okay. If you're dealing with nonsense and ignorance, you now have the power to choose when you want to be a part of that conversation or not. Because that's energy that you're putting in and energy people are giving you. Why waste your time? If it's something that's wasting your time, then there's no reason to join that. Now, if you feel like you're being a benefit to yourself or others that you feel like makes sense to you, then by all means, like, feel free to show up and show out. But it's not your job. We got Google. We literally have Google. Like, it's not that deep.
Look at that.
It's not that deep.
I mean, I agree. It's all about the energy. If you trust your gut and you just follow your intuition and allow that to speak, if you feel like that you are driven to do so, then by all means. But if you feel it's like punching and headbutting the wall, then you're literally gonna punch and headbutt a wall. So there's no end to that, except blood and unconsciousness. And the wall's still there. No damage.
Yeah, I mean, if I take a different stance if I could, especially because I deal with so many white people that they just don't know. Like they just, if you step out of New York, it's like there's not many of us in different, places of the country. There's almost none at all. So it's like they really don't know. So if they ask me and I feel like it's a genuine question and they genuinely want to know, I have no problem being like, oh yeah, it's this and that. Like I say, I get the question a lot about like being black and Hispanic. Why do you speak Spanish? You got 5 minutes, I'll explain the slave trade. And so I have no problem explaining it.
Basic history.
Nah, it's to your point. It's definitely a play on ignorance versus innocence there,
And I think
and you
something's
definitely
also-
have, and that's how I've always seen it. Like it's real easy to just like, are you like innocently like really trying to figure this out? Because I got time.
Yeah.
It's also like,
That
to
time.
me, it also runs a spectrum. Like there's like your red hat over here that you don't interact with, but there's the people that you work with, and like years later they'll say something fucked up, and you're like, fuck, like. And so you feel like, we're talking about being real and being vulnerable. You're like, I don't want to leave you out there on this regressive island where you fucked up. But it's like, it's a case-by-case scenario, but like, you need to look that, like he said, you need to look it up, or you just need to know that the people that are in this room that you offended are not going to tell you, but I'm going to be, in that space with you right now to tell you that you fucked up. And up to you how you figure it out, if you want to research it, or I'm not going to give you links, but the people in this room that like see you as a supervisor are not going to tell you that. But like, it's just like, I don't give a fuck if like, I will risk whatever if the people around me are going to be comfortable. And somebody who doesn't get it, just be like, they just need to be aware that they overstepped, because that's usually what they don't see, right? It's like, oh, I didn't know what I said was messed up. And it's like, well, it was, figure it out.
And that actually happened the other day at my office, where one of the PTs, who's a Filipino guy, we were sitting with a room of women, and this is not racist or anything, but he was saying to her, no, Omar, she's acting a certain way because she's on her pee. And I'm like, what? She's on her what? He's like, oh, she's on her pee. And I'm like, they're right here, though. And he's like, what? And I'm like, yo, don't do that. Don't other her or make her feel like she's doing something wrong because she's on her. You can say period, by the way. You can say it.
I was gonna
period,
say,
period,
like,
period,
how old
period,
is he?
Period. It don't matter how he's stupid, whatever the case. But I had to tell him, I'm like, honestly, why are you making it seem like because she's on her period that she's emotionally overbearing? Like, she don't have to be on her period to be emotionally overbearing. And you can be emotionally overbearing, period. And actually one woman, period, right? One woman, yeah, one woman actually defended him. And she's like, why are you getting on to him about that? I was like, because men need to stand up to other men whenever they do stuff that doesn't actually relate. It's like he's putting her in a gender role. Like she's not acting that way. Maybe she just had a bad email or somebody said something twisted and she don't feel like responding to you, man. Like it has nothing to do with her period, so don't call that out. And he was like, oh, yeah, man, I guess I won't talk to you anymore. I'm like, cool.
He was in his feelings. I think that's interesting. I was gonna add, because that happens to me all the time, and I have a moment of like, I have like 10 seconds where I can choose to jump in the conversation or like see my way out. But I have had very hard conversations. Some of them have gone really well. Others have had people just straight up cry. And so I wanted to know if you guys have ever had a moment. I don't know if white men would react that way. I think they would react with anger. I don't know. I'm also leaning in on stereotypes here. But I know for white women, the majority, whenever I've like, hey, that was inappropriate or whatever, is just like, just lots of crying. And it's like, whoa, I don't even know what to do with that, because now it's not about the thing that happened. Now it's about me comforting you and how you're feeling, and we're moving away from the conversation.
I've personally never experienced that, but I will give a story that my lady told me when she was in teacher training for yoga, and it was mostly women of color, and they were talking about white privilege. And so she was telling me this story as she's a white woman, but she's open to understanding where she is in her spectrum. But these women were not, and so they were getting up actually like crying about their white privilege and stuff, right? And people looking at her like, why are you crying about your white privilege to make us feel bad. And I mean, that was the only thing that I can relate to that. And to me, it was hilarious because I'm like, wow, people really turn things around. Like they'll take something and make themselves still the light and the pinnacle. And I thought that was it was an unfortunate story, but also over time it was kind of hilarious because it was like, wow, that happened.
That happens all the time. All right. So on that note, if anybody else got another question before we keep it moving? All right, y'all. We'll give it up for our panelists up here. Y'all were honest, funny, warm. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your vulnerability. All right. Well, next up we have an awesome, incredible human. He is a poet, a rapper, a writer, a copywriter, a father, a man of color, a Twitter influencer. He's going to hate that I said that. So we are going to make our way out from up here. Clap it out one more time and keep it clapping for Joel.
Hi, I'm Joel. I do stuff. I'm gonna read some poems. Only if you feel like you need it. Can y'all hear me? Do I need to like? This is what do I need to look at the camera when I'm talking to? Okay. Audio. Cool. Gotcha. So do I need the microphone for the audio? So the street can hear it, yes. I hate microphones so much. Man. Okay. Cool. Okay, great. So I'm gonna try to do this while I turn pages with my thumb. Don't laugh if I don't turn them right. I do not want to be more accessible. I do not want to be more wearable. I do not want to be better suited for a bigger audience. I do not want to appeal to the masses. I do not want to be called massa or daddy while fucking sometimes. I don't want to make art for everyone. I don't want your mother to love me. I don't want an award for diplomacy. I don't want to be safe. I don't want to be digestible. I do not want to be homogenized. I do not want to be acceptable. I do not want to be digestible. I don't want to be your mistake. I do not want to be easy. I do not want to be your rollover minutes. I don't want to be your secret. I don't want to be your arm candy. I don't want to be your emergency glass. I don't want to be your crash dummy. I don't want to be your obstacle course. I don't want to be your suicide attempt. I don't want to be your pilgrimage to Mecca. I don't want to be your wholesome. I do not want to be your death by asphyxiation. I don't want to be your last resort. I don't want to be your savior complex. I don't want to be your daddy issues. I don't want to be your next best thing. I do not want to be your everything. I do not want to be your luxurious. I do not want to be your pride and joy. I do not want to be your dream nigga. I do not want to be your escape. I do not want to be your case study. I do not want to be your token insert stereotype movement or convenient thing for you here. I am a whole human. I am complex. I am T minus and counting. I am a bomb and a handgun. I am fellatio in your living room. I am big dick when your mother ain't looking. I am working on my FICO score. I masturbate because I don't want to cry today. I am my father's bad habits. I am light enough for the boardroom, but too light for your parents and too dark for a raise. I am only a high school diploma. I am therapy and I don't know the names of all the poets. I am every homeless man that looks like my father. I am too soft for hood bitches. I am well spoken for a black man. I am my daughter's biological father. Surprise. I am a slave to the pussy. I am a wannabe. I am a Buffalo Soldier. I am a time machine. I am an Alabama abortion clinic. I am coloreds only. I am the first fire my daddy started. I am Hendrix, hands folded. I am Henny straight. I am her dick appointment. I am hearts dilated. All the codes in the matrix. I am jagged little pill, Lilith Fair, Roots Picnic, your man crush Wednesday. I am a hoe, a ass nigga, a whole ass nigga. I am let me build, let me hold your ass nigga. I am a rape survivor. I am a man who says molested instead of rape because he is scared. I am sushi and gunshots. I am gang and a library card. I am bullets on my fire escape. I am open mouth surgery, candids when everyone is looking. I am Central Park, April 19th, 1989. I am the diaspora at the end of a dope needle, at the end of my rope, the last bars in ether, the first verse in the Bible, Sean Carter's last album, the comma before the period after, a crack house and a church hymn. I am enough. There was a lot of talk about vulnerability, and I thought that was so beautiful because I think there's a lot of work. God, microphones. There's a lot of work needed to like unpack the trauma, like past trauma, and like how we've dealt with our trauma, or rather how we're not dealing with our trauma. And so part of my work as a writer, as an artist, as a father, to a beautiful Afro-Latina daughter is unpacking trauma, and like how do we unpack the trauma, and how do we help communities of color unpack the trauma. No offense to white folks in the room, but my primary concern is the brown and black folks who haven't been given the skills, and so I hope sometimes that the writing does that. Once upon a time I was a fish. No, I was a gold star. No, I was an atheist. No, that isn't right. I'm an amethyst. No, that sounds foreign. I am sunshine rind. Wait, is that real? Wait. Let me shake this change in my pocket. Let me stare at this soapbox. Let me juggle my emotions. Let me do this without alcohol or a lack of sleep or without fucking something to distract me from Trump and ICE and malnourished polar bears. I need time to talk to a mirror. What are we without our things? Who are we when we run out of milk, out of bread, out of diapers, out of excuses, out of color crayons, out of mind, out of oxygen, out of hands to beat cases with, to beat black women with, to beat off imaginary lengthy phalluses, hands to make beats with, to take beats, breaths, pauses, to hit something, to smoke something, to want something. What are we without our vices? Without Meadows, without Hennessy, without IG models, without the taste of alkaline salting our lips, without much fluoride in our taps, without medals for taxing niggas, for tapping niggas' jaws, for tacking niggas to coffins, for tagging dead niggas' names on school buses, without shooting immigrants, raping immigrants, tallying or falsifying a census to fortify our senses, to put a fork to Celsius to check the temperature of what is at stake over yonder here. Nothing, I bet, nothing, I imagine. This is what happens when you bite too many apples, hide behind too many fig leaves, force feed yourself too many flags, when you ask too many questions like, when is daddy coming home? Where are we going to sleep? When will the lights be on? Where is the food? Why is there no food here? Whose bed am I in? Who is this man between my legs? Who left this noose here? When did AIDS become a black gay thing? Too many text paragraphs and oracle, not fiction, but the vision of it like a prescription covered. The vision of it. No insurance. Beloved genuine article, origin story, returned even Adam back to black particles. Can you imagine? Oh, this is better. We mimic the elders, we a witness to what you partial to. Learned gimmicks come harder than porn stars. Dedicated to images, hard times know what a 40 ounce to your pops will do. Dark crimes rise like sea tides. Young kids, souls dirty, hands rigid. No Frigidaire was lucky to walk in a kitchen with a fridge in there. A bucket with a hole big enough so you can piss in there. Close to a corner, we can pitch it there. From an era where a dap and a pound is a sonic boom surround sound. The rooms around you hit the ground running when the bullets start gunning like colonists looking for islands to mix their babies brown. What are we but a composite, a deposit in order, chronologic chromosomes, administer drugs, catastrophic felons become magic, A&Rs, everyone in your pockets. Watch the process, filtering needles and comments for the sake of being nostalgic. These are the projects, this is a profit. Paper airplanes in our palms, call to Allah or arms, fringe benefits of being fake prophets, of finding napalm in your closet, relics of your black son hiding under shoddy ruse because it is easier to hide liking boys than telling your uncle the truth. Who are we but turntables, spinning records in accordance with the bliss of our worldly coordinates? Half Cain, half pseudo-able heroes. Cables connect us to the tissues of a label. You a slut, you a nigger, you a bullet, you a trigger, you a Gandhi, you a Hitler, you a killer, you a homo, you are far from home, Annie. You cannot click your heels this time. There was no white Prince Harry on a horse. You cannot find a fair named damsel with hair the length of castle to come save us. Go figure, tapping fingers, touching tabs, tucking mystery flab and saliva under finster pictures. The fables they told us to keep us alive, to keep us sane, to keep us slave, to take the edge off, to take us off of an edge, to cliff us off of a balcony. Off with their heads, they say. You don't need to go to school, they say. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps, they say. You are not enough, they say. This is far from a supersize, they say. Get high off these memes, these likes, this tummy tea, these filters, they tell you. Give me something to believe in besides fairy tales, besides Bessies and bedside manner and mammies who are we but obstructions, abstract bellhops, Taco Bell order takers, besides hors d'oeuvre servers, besides welfare recipients, besides border beggars, besides ourselves. We are. Look at the madness. Look at all the stories they told us. Stories of gingerbread white men walking on water. Who is your God? Flip your dollar side. See for yourself. We are built like these pyramids. Wall Street is just a black body burned backwards. They say don't believe in fairy tales. Fuck you. I am a walking miracle, a somersaulting Jehovah, tilting on an axis. We are more than mere mortals. We are mortar shells, grotesque objects, oblong along ancient illegal porn sites and teen acne behind a screen. You cannot dream this kind of shit. No, not this time. No, give me something to believe in besides fairy tales, besides make-believe, besides B-sides on broken cassette tapes, rolling over broken American dreams. Anything else, please, but this. How we doing? Thank you. That was really long. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm trying not to drag this out. Dottie, how are we on time? Do you know? Brett, how are we on time? Huh? One more? Perfect. Okay, so do we want to hear like, oh, love, or do we want to hear some like, yeah, I came up in the hood shit? First, I want to hear that hood shit, nigga. Give me that hood shit, dog. Okay, cool. I don't need my book for this one. It's not hood shit. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I'd rather die than let go of all of my dreams. 1 foot forward, all I gotta do is proceed. Trying to do something to better the life of my seed. We're gonna make it. All we gotta do is believe. It's never too late to dream. So, there's a difference between being broke and being uncomfortable and living good and eating well just like a Huxtable. Stick stones break bones, but words hurt. So I am Jackie Joyner Kersey jumping over a verse. Hurdle over bars gets worse. Disperse the bubble you sit in. Crossover J, get more righteous than Christians. An old soul, still see spirits stuck in a sit-in. I don't need a stool, just give me a star to sit in. Living testimony I'm giving you to the point of view of the few and the many in the pews. Looking for pools of sharks to prove that you don't need an ark to move that. Choose to chew the fat of the lamb. Land on a plan to stand on, or at least build something your children can understand. I can't do can't because I remember my father's hands dried out and calloused because he was picking up cans. Me and my mama on Fordham and dollar vans. While y'all were busy watching The Throne, Aunt Peggy called and told me that my dad's in a nursing home. So let's compare my problems to yours. All I hear is blah, 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 flapping the jaws. No backing, we rapping just for applause. Crossing our toes, these flows are open doors. Like in a session, focus, listen for punches. I used to get the ticket in line for the school lunches. We wasn't poor, but we had enough. Mama cried once she saw Ski in them handcuffs. I say a prayer for the ones that came before us. Feeling bigger than big when I'm on stage performing. I'll be watching y'all interviews, vain and porous. I'll be writing songs, 2 verses, a B chorus. Laughing at my tears, remembered when they ignored us. I'm a Capricorn, D and Ski are both the Taurus. So the pressure to be stubborn is so enormous. For my birthday, I bought my first pair of Jordans. Be happy that I made it. There were times I couldn't afford it. People downloaded freedom. Freedom wasn't important. What really was important was the feeling that freedom offered. Lay me down to sleep, each bar covered in corpses. Pen has the magic we found in Malcolm's coffin. I could have been in juvie, stuck in Spofford. It's what separates rich visionaries from paupers. Raise your hand if you never knew your father. Living life like Linda T's only son, only star, only moon, yeah, the only one who was predestined to rise. So my future like waves dipping through tides. Lot of fake friends, fuck them, said let them dive. Then I met T, found keys, told me to drive. Me and I, 2 selves, how I survive. Fried rice, fried scallops, and fries on the side. Mama bleeding when I arrived. Doctors looked at her stomach, told her think I should die. God told them chill, nah, I think he fly. So I made a wish up to the sky. I closed my eyes, said my prayers, and then I tried. You can do it too, no matter how's of the wise. We're talking about Egyptians building pyramid pies. We're talking about eclipsing, giving eyes to the blind. Life, one big roller to die. Either get to living or just roll over. Die. Thank you.
Wow, I didn't even know you could sing. Okay. Nigga, that's all I got from that whole performance. He could sing. All right, y'all. So that's the end of our talk and our performance. Thank you again for your attention, for your time. Time is valuable. So really appreciate you coming out tonight and supporting us on a hot Tuesday. Hopefully you were able to stay cool. Now everybody has an AC at home. Times are rough, yo. But we have some more drinks still left over, so hopefully you can stick around for a little bit, just bingo talk, and we'll stick around. Thank you, y'all.